Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? Maybe because they thought she didn't belong there. Maybe because in their minds, war and endurance still had an age limit. The air at 11,000 feet burned in the lungs like a slow fire. The mountain rose above the clouds, sharp as a blade, and on its granite face clung the high-altitude warfare training center, a cluster of gray prefab structures that looked less like a base and more like a dare. It was a place meant to break people. The brochure said forge them. But those who came here knew better. The difference was mostly academic. Anya Sharma stood at the base gate, her duffel at her feet, boots sunk into a crust of half-frozen earth. The cold bit through her uniform. The wind howled like something alive. It wasn't her first time in the mountains, but something about this one, this quiet, merciless height, felt different. Inside, the clerk's radio crackled. Static, a pause, then a voice sharp and irritated. "Send her home." The words weren't meant for her, but they hit her anyway. The young corporal at the desk froze, eyes darting from the radio to the woman standing before him. "Sir," he stammered, "her transfer orders are from command level. It's confirmed." Another pause, longer this time. Then that voice again, colder now. "I don't care if they're from God, Corporal. Look at her file. 43 years old, desk duty for a decade. We don't have the resources for remedial training or medevac for sprained ankles. Find a pretext. Send her home." The radio clicked off. Anya didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't give him what he expected, the flinch, the embarrassment, the protest. She just looked out the window. A lone eagle traced lazy circles against the endless blue. Effortless, precise, economical. It wasted nothing. She understood that kind of motion. The corporal swallowed hard, guilt rising in his throat. He was barely 20. His name tag said Sadto. And he looked at her the way a boy looks at a test. He knows he's already failed. She wasn't imposing, not tall, not loud. Her hair was dark, streaked with silver, pulled into a tight regulation bun. Her eyes, they were dark and still, too still, like deep water that hides what's underneath. "Ma'am," he started awkwardly, "Colonel Thorne, he's particular about readiness." "I am ready," she said simply. Her voice didn't rise, didn't falter. It was calm, the kind of calm that comes from someone who's already lived through harder days. Outside, the wind carried the scent of pine and cold stone. Inside, Sato typed nervously, assigning her a bunk no one wanted. "Barrack C, bunk 27, co-ed." He hesitated. "It's all we have." She nodded once, understood. As she turned to leave, her gaze lingered on a massive wall map behind his desk. A jagged ridge ran through the middle of it like a scar. The label read, "The Serpent's Tooth." "What's the record?" she asked. "The what?" "For the course." He blinked. "It's not really a course you run for time, ma'am, it's a qualification." "Everything is run for time," she replied quietly. He hesitated. "Well, the unofficial record is from a Navy SEAL instructor 2 years ago, 9 minutes 47 seconds, but it was easier then. No one's broken 11 on the new version." Her eyes traced the contour lines of the ridge, the incline, the choke points, the elevation gain. She didn't nod in admiration. She calculated. Angles, timing, breathing. Already solving the mountain in her mind. "Thank you, Corporal." And then she was gone, stepping into the freezing wind that bit at her face, walking toward a world that had already decided she wasn't built for it. That was the moment, though no one knew it yet, when the legend began. The dismissal came less than an hour later. Colonel Marcus Thorne didn't call her to his office. He intercepted her outside the mess hall, deliberately, publicly, the kind of humiliation only power can deliver. "Sharma," he barked, not a greeting, an accusation. She stopped, setting her empty tray aside. Her posture was easy but balanced, a quiet defiance wrapped in military discipline. "Ready, Colonel." His jaw twitched. "I've read your file," he said, his voice low and sharp. "What's left of it? 10 years pushing paper at Fort Belvoir. Before that, blank pages, redacted nonsense. Now command sends me a 43-year-old quartermaster to one of the hardest environments on the continent. You want to explain that to me?" He wanted her to break. He wanted the excuse. He wanted to confirm his bias. That strength came with youth and relevance with rank. "My orders are to report for active duty," she said evenly. "I have done so." Thorne stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Let be direct, Sharma. I don't know what favor you pulled or what quota you're here to fill, but you are a liability, and I will fix that." Her face remained unreadable. Stillness, that was her armor. She didn't meet aggression with aggression. She let it burn itself out. "What are my duties, Colonel?" He laughed, short and bitter. "Duties? You'll stay out of the way. I'm assigning you to the supply depot. You'll count bolts and label boxes. When the next convoy arrives, you'll be on it heading back down the mountain. Clear?" "Crystal, sir." That was all. She didn't protest, didn't ask for another chance. She turned and walked away. Her boots left shallow prints in the snow that the wind began erasing immediately. Thorne watched her go, annoyed that she hadn't reacted. He wanted defiance. He got silence. And silence was harder to defeat. The supply depot sat at the base of the mountain, next to the starting point of the Serpent's Tooth. It was supposed to be punishment, a graveyard for forgotten soldiers. For her, it became something else. Inside the metal walls, the air smelled of oil and cold steel. Boxes stacked by decades, ropes, harnesses, carabiners, half outdated, half forgotten. To anyone else it was chaos. To her it was a map. She began to work. Quietly, methodically. Counting wasn't enough. She cleaned, repaired, tested. Ropes for frays, clips for lag, gear for weakness. Her precision unsettled the others. Private Cohen, who was nursing an injured knee, finally asked, "You don't have to do all that, ma'am. Just count the boxes, fill the forms. That's all they want." "If a thing is worth doing," she said, never looking up, "it's worth doing correctly." What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the depot gave her the perfect vantage point. Through a window she had quietly cleaned herself, she could see the entire course. The Serpent's Tooth. A climb, a traverse, a rappel, a crawl through tunnels. A test of body, mind, and nerve. She watched every soldier who ran it. Not as a spectator. As a student. She memorized their movements, their timing, their mistakes. She noted how the wind shifted between dawn and noon. How shadows made one path slick and another steady. How the targets popped up not randomly, but in rhythm. Every failure was a clue. Every stumble a lesson. And she was learning. Sato, the same clerk from her first day, started noticing. How she was never idle. How she handled equipment like a craftsman, not a clerk. One day he caught her holding 2 carabiners, eyes closed. "This one," she said, lifting the older model, "has a gate lag of 3 milliseconds. In this cold, that could mean a clean clip or a fall." He stared, realizing he was standing in front of someone who saw what others didn't. He started to understand. She wasn't hiding, she was preparing. And while the mountain tested others, she was testing the mountain. When the storm warning came, a blizzard forming fast, 2 to 3 weeks of whiteout, panic spread through the camp. The colonel's quota wasn't met. The pressure built. He started rushing the course. Rushing people. And people got hurt. One fell from the traverse and dislocated a shoulder. Another slammed into a wall and cracked ribs. Mistakes multiplied, Fear crept in. Anya watched quietly from the depot door. "They're rushing," she murmured. And when she said it, it wasn't criticism. It was prophecy. Because she'd already seen what happens when soldiers rush mountains, and mountains don't forgive impatience. What happens when the one person everyone ignores moves first? When the quietest one in the room hears the alarm before anyone else? The mountain had turned hostile. The wind had teeth now, biting at every exposed inch of skin. The course that once baked under the pale autumn sun was now slick with ice, every rope stiff, every rock coated in a sheen of danger. Colonel Thorne's voice echoed across the radios, hard, relentless. "Next team, go. The storm's not going to wait for us." He was chasing quotas, not safety. 12 qualified out of 30. He needed 30. Command had made that clear. He didn't see people anymore. He saw numbers slipping through his fingers. Anya watched from the doorway of the supply depot, one hand resting lightly on the frame, eyes narrow against the wind. She could see the fear. Not the loud kind that screams. The quiet kind that makes hands tremble when clipping onto a rope. That makes a confident soldier hesitate before stepping off an edge. Private Garcia was one of those soldiers. Barely 20. Strong, fast, but untested. He'd aced the climb, reached the traverse early. But now he stood at the edge of the platform, staring at the chasm below, where the wind howled like a live thing. "Move it, Garcia," the instructor shouted. "You're holding up the whole line." Garcia clipped on. His fingers shook. He tried to pull himself across the single rope bridge, but his form was wrong, arms locked, shoulders high. He swung wildly, panicking, overcorrecting. Then came the sound, a dull crack as his helmet hit the cliff wall. And just like that, he went limp. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The sound of the impact seemed to freeze the entire mountain. Then shouts, urgent, chaotic. Someone called for the medics. Someone else for the rescue team. But they were 10 minutes away, dealing with another casualty. 10 minutes. In the thin air at 11,000 feet, with a head injury that was a lifetime. Inside the control tower, Colonel Thorne's voice roared through the comms. "Where's my rescue team?" Static, then a nervous reply. "Engaged with previous evac, sir. 10 mics." 10 minutes. The instructor on the platform was fumbling with rope, trying to rig a system he barely remembered from training. His hands shook. The others just stood there, frozen by procedure, by fear, by doubt. Everyone except her. Anya dropped the inventory sheet in her hand. It drifted to the concrete floor, forgotten. Her body was already moving. There was no hesitation. No request for permission. No waiting for orders. She strode past the barracks, boots crunching against the ice-crusted ground, toward the secondary cache of climbing gear she'd organized weeks ago, equipment no one even knew was there. Private Cohen saw her and blinked, confused. "Ma'am, you can't." But he stopped. Because the woman who had been quietly sorting bolts an hour ago wasn't the same woman tightening a harness with 3 precise motions. Her focus was lethal. Her speed terrifying in its control. She snatched a static rope, a compact ascender, and a pair of gloves. No wasted movement. No explanation. Then she ran. Not fast, efficient. Her stride low, measured, perfectly balanced. The kind of running that came from years of knowing how to move under fire. When she reached the platform, the instructor was still fumbling. She took one look and spoke, calm, direct. "Give me your rope." Her tone cut through the wind like a blade. Not loud. Just certain. The sergeant blinked. "Who the hell are you?" She didn't answer. She took the rope from his trembling hands, tied a mule hitch in under 5 seconds, clipped into a new anchor she'd identified days ago, one everyone else had ignored. "Belay me," she said. Before he could react, she was over the edge. The crowd gasped. Even the storm seemed to pause. She didn't repel, not the way they'd been trained. She performed a controlled drop, sliding down with gloved hands modulating friction against the rope, landing on a narrow ledge 2 inches wide, just above Garcia's dangling form. Her voice softened. "Garcia, you're secure. We're going to get you home." He didn't respond, but she worked anyway, clipping a secondary line to his harness, checking his airway, adjusting his angle to ease his breathing. Her motions were fast, clinical, the kind of speed that comes from repetition beyond counting. Then she did something that no one in the tower had ever seen. Instead of pulling him up, which would risk his neck, she clipped his harness to her own. And then she kicked off the wall. 2 bodies, 1 line, swinging across the open void like a pendulum. The wind roared. Someone shouted. The instructor froze, rope slack in his hands. They hit the far platform hard, but she absorbed the impact, twisting midair, rolling them safely onto the grating. She unclipped, stabilized him, and stepped back as the medics came running. 90 seconds. That's all it took. From impact to rescue, 90 seconds. In the control tower, silence. No one spoke. The screens flickered in the cold light, showing the replay. The colonel's jaw clenched, his knuckles white on the console. He had seen it all: the knot, the swing, the landing. It wasn't luck. It wasn't desperation. It was mastery. The kind of mastery you don't get from a desk. When Anya walked back across the rope, her steps were light, unhurried. She didn't look at anyone. Didn't wait for approval. She just returned to the depot, picked up her clipboard, and resumed her inventory. The world had shifted. No one realized it yet. But something fundamental had changed in the air. By evening, the story had already spread. Not officially. No reports. No announcements. Just whispers. The woman from logistics. The one who saved Garcia. The one who moved like she'd been born on a mountain. Some said she'd run across the rope. Others swore she'd tied the knot blindfolded. Myth grew faster than truth ever could. Colonel Thorne replayed the footage again and again. Zoomed in, slowed it down. He analyzed every frame, the knot, the balance, the rhythm of her movements. He knew skill when he saw it. This wasn't the improvisation of luck. This was muscle memory, surgical precision honed over years. He opened her file again. Anna Sharma, age 43. Fitness scores barely passing. No special operations records. Nothing to explain what he'd just seen. The file was a lie. Or at least incomplete. And Thorne, a man built from order, rank, and hierarchy, hated nothing more than an unanswered question. In the days that followed, the tone around the base changed. The laughter died down when she entered the mess hall. The joke stopped. The eyes that once dismissed her now tracked her every movement with quiet curiosity. She had become something else. An uncertainty in their system. A living contradiction. Private Sadto watched her most closely. He saw how she cleaned her boots every night with mechanical precision, how she still studied the course in silence through the window, not admiring it, but deconstructing it. He started to realize. She wasn't training to prove anything. She was preparing for something none of them could see coming. And deep down, he hoped he'd never have to find out what it was. The colonel, though, he couldn't leave it alone. He had to know. He found himself standing by his window at night, watching the depot, the soft light glowing behind its frosted glass. Sometimes he could see her silhouette sitting at a desk, motionless, head bowed over paperwork that probably wasn't paperwork at all. He'd sent her there to be forgotten, but she was the only thing he could think about. The mountain outside groaned under the growing storm. The sky was turning the color of steel, and in the thin air between them, a silent battle had begun. Not of rank, not of strength, of understanding, because Thorn wasn't just fighting the storm. He was fighting something older, something he couldn't see. A woman who didn't need permission to act. A ghost from somewhere buried deep in the classified past. And though he didn't know it yet, she was about to remind him that some orders are not meant to be obeyed. What does a man do when everything he believes about strength starts to crumble? When control, the thing he's built his whole life on, begins to slip through his fingers. Colonel Thorne hadn't slept much since the rescue. The image of her swinging across the chasm played in his head on repeat. That perfect, silent arc of motion that defied everything he thought he knew about discipline and ability. He'd seen seasoned operators freeze in that same situation. He'd seen younger, stronger soldiers choke on hesitation. But she hadn't. She'd moved like someone who didn't recognize fear. Or maybe like someone who had already made peace with it. He stood by the window in his quarters, looking out over the base. Snow clouds were rolling in, the kind that looked soft until they turned the sky into a white wall. In the distance, the serpent's tooth cut through the mist like a knife. It looked impossible even on a clear day. In a storm, it looked alive. He sipped his coffee bitter, burned, and stared at the depot down below. A faint glow behind the frosted glass. She was in there, of course. Working, always working. He had tried to dismiss her. Now he couldn't ignore her. He told himself it was curiosity, professional interest. But it was something closer to doubt. And doubt for a man like Thorne was poison. The storm warnings grew worse by the hour. The meteorologists spoke in clipped voices. Cyclonic pattern intensifying. Blizzard conditions expected within 36 hours, 2 to 3 weeks duration. That meant one thing: lockdown. And lockdown meant failure. Thorne's quota would freeze with the mountain. Command wanted 30 certified operators ready for deployment. He had 12. 12. Pressure crawled up his spine like ice. He doubled the training schedule. Cut rest times. Rushed the teams through the course. The serpent's tooth, already deadly, became something else, a meat grinder for pride. Men fell. Ropes snapped. The medics worked without rest. And for every injury report that landed on Thorne's desk, another sliver of anger lodged deeper into his chest. He needed someone to blame. And her name was written on the inside of his mind like a scar. Anya saw it all. From the depot window, she watched the soldiers stumble and fail. She heard the curses carried on the wind. Saw the frustration in their bodies, the exhaustion behind their bravado. "They're rushing," she murmured to herself again. Her tone wasn't judgment. It was simple observation. Fact. Private Cohen, sitting nearby with his bad leg, looked up from the crate he was using as a seat. "Colonel's pushing hard," he said. "Wants his numbers before the storm, doesn't care who breaks trying." Anya didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the course, the rope bridge swaying over the gorge, the ice on the overhang, the soldiers clinging to it like insects in a hurricane. Every gust of wind told her something. Every pattern of movement, every failed grip, was another data point in the ledger of her mind. She wasn't angry at Thorne. Not yet. But she could see where this path was leading. And she knew the mountain wasn't the only thing that could kill them. The next morning came gray and heavy, the air thick with the metallic smell of snow. The wind had teeth now, sharp, cruel. The mountain loomed, waiting. Anya was up before dawn, stretching in the shadows outside the barracks. Her movements were slow, deliberate, silent. The kind of discipline no one noticed until they did. Footsteps crunched on the frost behind her. "Sharma," a voice said. She turned. Colonel Thorne stood there, coat collar high, cap low, his breath fogging in the air. There was no anger on his face this time. Just something tighter. Colder. "The volunteer list for the final qualification run is full," he said. He paused, studying her expression. "But I saved a spot for you." It wasn't kindness. It was challenge. The unspoken message clear as daylight. Prove me wrong or prove me right. Anya didn't hesitate. She simply nodded. "Understood, Colonel." He searched her eyes for something: pride, fear, defiance. He found none. Only that same, infuriating calm. He turned away, voice clipped. "I need one more qualified operator. The course opens at 700. Be there." The sound of his boots on gravel faded into the wind. Anya stood there for a moment longer, exhaling slowly. The air burned her throat, sharp and cold. She could feel the mountain calling. This wasn't about rank anymore. It wasn't even about the record. It was about truth. The kind that can't be spoken, only proven. By sunrise, the staging area looked like an arena. Every off-duty soldier had gathered along the perimeter, breath fogging in the icy air. The Serpent's Tooth stood like a frozen cathedral above them. The wind howled through the cliffs, singing the anthem of men who'd thought they were invincible. Anya stood among the volunteers, smaller than the rest, older still. The others were younger, Marines, Rangers, recon specialists. Bodies built like machines. But their eyes flicked toward her, uncertain. The story of the rescue had spread. And now curiosity wrestled with disbelief. The colonel's voice boomed through the loudspeakers. "Conditions are at minimums, the course is live. Time starts on my mark. Good luck, gentlemen and Specialist Sharma." That pause, just long enough to let everyone know this wasn't just another run. Anya didn't react. She was inside the silence now, the kind that comes before a fight, before a storm, before everything changes. She checked her harness, her clips, her rifle. Every motion rehearsed, efficient, flawless. Beside her, a young Marine captain smirked. "Don't hurt yourself, Grandma." He said it loud enough for laughter to follow. But none came. The air had changed. Anya didn't look at him. Didn't blink. The mountain filled her vision. That was all that existed now. "On my mark," the colonel said. 3, 2, 1, mark. The whistle split the air. The group surged forward. The Marine captain sprinted ahead like he had something to prove. The others followed, breath already ragged from the altitude. Anya started last. Her pace almost slow. Measured. Rhythmic. Spectators murmured, confused, disappointed. Hadn't they seen her fly before? But this wasn't about speed. Not yet. At the gear-up station, the others fumbled, gloves clumsy on metal, clips catching, straps twisting. Anya's hands moved like clockwork. Harness, rope, rifle. Done. Half the time of the fastest man. Then she was moving. The rock face loomed, 30 meters of cold granite and thin air. The others were already halfway up, muscles straining, grunting through the climb. They fought the rock. She read it. She didn't pull with her arms. She pushed with her legs, body close to the stone, conserving energy. Her breathing steady. Controlled. She veered right, away from the obvious route everyone else used. Toward the line she'd studied for weeks from the depot window. Steeper but safer. hidden ledges, better holds. Her movements were fluid, a dancer on vertical ground. At the summit of the climb, she pulled herself over the lip. Versed, 10 seconds ahead of the Marine. The crowd fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. In the control tower, Thorne leaned forward, jaw tight. His eyes locked on her screen. At that exact moment, a supply convoy rolled into base, a rare sight this late in the season. A man in his late 50s stepped out of the lead vehicle, stretching his back, squinting toward the mountain. Sergeant Major Elias Vance, a face carved by war and weather. He caught sight of the figures moving up the ridge, tiny against the snow. And then one figure, smaller, faster, more precise than all the rest. Something about the way she moved stopped him cold. He walked toward the control tower without a word. Inside, the room was tense. Technicians hunched over monitors, breath fogging the air. All eyes on one feed, Sharma, tearing through the course like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Vance's voice was low, almost reverent. "Colonel Thorne." Thorne didn't turn. "Busy." "With respect, sir." Vance stepped closer, eyes fixed on the screen. "You need to see this." "I am seeing it," Thorne snapped. "She's having a good run." Vance shook his head slowly. A strange, sad smile touched his lips. "Sir, that's not a good run." He pointed at the monitor. "That's doctrine." Thorne frowned. "What the hell are you talking about?" Vance's eyes never left the screen. "Do you know who that is?" Thorne scoffed. "A logistics clerk who got lucky twice." Vance finally turned, his voice dropping to a whisper. "No, sir, that's Spectre." Thorne blinked. "What?" "She's not from logistics," Vance said. "She wrote the logistics for people like us. She was Section 7, Advanced Solo Operative Program. Most of it's still classified. Half the generals in command don't even know it existed. She didn't just train operatives, she built them." Thorne stared at him, pale. "Section 7's a myth." Vance's gaze hardened. So was she. He nodded toward the screen, where Anya was already moving into the tunnels, rifle snapping to targets with mechanical precision. "She's not running your course, Colonel. She's reliving her exam." Outside, the crowd held its breath. Anya emerged from the crawl, snow clinging to her uniform, eyes dark with focus. The final stretch, the summit beacon waited above her, wreathed in white mist. Her hand brushed the stone as she climbed. Slow, deliberate, steady. Each movement a prayer to muscle memory. Each breath a testament to something the young ones hadn't yet learned. Discipline isn't loud. It's quiet. And it remembers. She reached the top, raised a gloved hand, and slapped the beacon. A chime echoed through the speakers. The digital clock froze. 9 minutes. 17 seconds. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then whispers. Then disbelief. Then a roar. She hadn't just beaten the record. She'd annihilated it. 30 seconds faster than the base's best. A minute faster than the old configuration. Faster than the theoretical limit. Faster than what they thought was humanly possible. In the control tower, Thorne stood motionless. Vance's words echoed in the silence. "Spectre." He looked at the monitor, the image of a woman standing alone at the peak of a mountain she'd just broken. And for the first time in years, Colonel Marcus Thorne didn't know what to say. How long does it take for a man's pride to melt? Maybe 9 minutes. And 17 seconds. That was all it took to shatter an entire belief system. A clock froze on that number, 0917, and in that frozen second, every certainty on the mountain began to crumble. Inside the control tower, the silence was deafening. Technicians stared at their screens, as if waiting for permission to breathe. No one moved. No one spoke. Colonel Thorne stood rigid, eyes locked on the image of a woman at the summit, small, motionless, alone, her hand resting on the beacon that had made her immortal. Outside, the wind howled, carrying snow that began to fall in fat, heavy flakes. Each one landed like punctuation at the end of a story. No one expected to end this way. She hadn't celebrated, hadn't raised her arms, hadn't even smiled. She just stood there, steady, composed, breathing slow and controlled. A quiet silhouette against a world she just conquered. "Sir," a voice whispered behind Thorne. It was Vance, still watching the monitors. Her file, the redactions weren't clerical. They were deliberate. Section 7 wiped every operative's record when they shut down the program. Spectre was their lead instructor. Solo infiltration, high-altitude survival, asymmetric operations. The works. Thorne didn't answer. His face was pale, his posture perfect, his mind chaos. He wanted to reject it, to say it was impossible. But the evidence was on the screen. He'd just seen it with his own eyes. He'd called her a mistake, a liability. He tried to send her home. And she'd rewritten the definition of the word soldier. Outside, the crowd of soldiers below had begun to stir. Murmurs spread like wildfire. "Did you see that? 917. She's not even out of breath. She's something else." The sound swelled, disbelief giving way to awe, awe turning into thunder. Then came the applause. It started small, a few claps near the observation deck. Then more. Then all at once, a roar of hands, boots, and voices. Not the polite applause of protocol. Not the celebration of entertainment. It was the sound of recognition, raw, instinctive, human. They weren't cheering for a record. They were cheering for revelation. Anya began her descent. Not through the official rappel. Not through the course she just conquered. She found the maintenance ladder along the rear ridge, the unglamorous way down. One rung at a time, snow dusting her sleeves. By the time she reached the ground, the storm had arrived. The air was thick with white. The sky had vanished. The soldiers parted as she approached, a ripple of silence spreading outward through the crowd. The ones who'd mocked her now stood with eyes lowered. The ones who doubted her now watched, as though witnessing something sacred. And at the front of that sea of faces stood Colonel Marcus Thorne. He'd come down from the tower. His hat was off. Snow clung to his shoulders. His expression unreadable. She stopped in front of him, standing as she always did, balanced, calm, still. They said nothing. The only sound was the storm. Then, in one sharp, deliberate motion, Thorne brought his boots together, heels cracking against the frozen ground. His arm rose. A perfect salute. Crisp, exact. Flawless. It wasn't the salute of an officer to a subordinate. It was the salute of a soldier to someone who had earned something far greater than rank. And then, as though commanded by something unseen, every soldier followed. Dozens of arms rising in unison. A forest of hands cutting through the snow. No words. Just the rhythm of respect. They were saluting the logistics clerk. The woman they had mocked, ignored, underestimated. They were saluting Spectre. Anya stood still for a long moment, the wind lifting strands of her hair, the snow melting on her face. Then finally, she raised her hand in return. Slow, clean. One motion. A perfect mirror. And in that instant, no one was thinking about rank or age or fitness scores. They were thinking about truth, the kind that can't be taught, can't be earned through reputation or approval. Only through endurance. Only through silence. That night, the blizzard descended in full fury. A white curtain that erased the world. The base became an island adrift in endless snow. The serpent's tooth disappeared, a ghost buried under wind and ice. For 3 days, visibility dropped to nothing. Flights grounded. Convoys trapped. The world held its breath beneath the weight of the storm. Inside the barracks, life shrank to a hum of generators and the low murmur of voices. Men who once shouted now spoke softly. Training stopped. Reflection began. Anya sat alone near the window of Barracks C, a mug of steaming coffee in her hands. The light from the storm flickered through the glass, painting her face in shifting shades of gray and white. She wasn't thinking about the record. Not about the applause. Not even about Thorne's salute. Her mind was quiet, dissecting the storm itself. The rhythm of the wind. The pulse of the white. The way chaos always hid patterns if you were patient enough to look. That's what survival really was, not strength, not luck, but observation. Patience. Clarity in the noise. The door opened. A gust of wind carried in a spray of snowflakes. Private Sato entered, shaking his jacket, stamping the cold off his boots. He spotted her near the window, hesitated, then walked over slowly. "Ma'am," he said, voice soft, respectful now. "Coffee." He held out a fresh mug, steaming. "I figured yours might be cold by now." She looked up, met his eyes. There was no awe in them. No fear. Just simple, honest respect, the kind that doesn't need words. She accepted the mug, fingers brushing his. "Thank you, Sato." He nodded once, almost like a bow, and turned to leave. Anya watched him go, the faintest hint of warmth touching her face. Then she looked back out the window. Outside, the storm howled, relentless, pure, untamable. The mountain was gone now, swallowed by white. But she knew it was still there. Waiting. Enduring. Just like her. Because the truth about strength isn't in what people see. It's in what survives when no one's watching. Hours passed. The base slept. The blizzard raged. And in that quiet room, a single woman sat unmoving, a forgotten soldier, a weapon of silence, sipping coffee, watching the world disappear into snow. Her reflection in the glass looked calm, almost ghostly. A shadow of who she once was, and who she had to become again. Outside, the world screamed. Inside, she didn't flinch. Because some people fight wars on battlefields. Others fight them in the space between breaths. And for those people, dignity doesn't shout. It simply acts. How quiet can a storm make a man? It's strange, the louder the wind screams outside, the quieter people become inside. After the blizzard swallowed the mountain, the base felt like a memory frozen in time. The storm lasted 3 days before it even began to ease. 3 days of white. 3 days of the wind, clawing at the walls like an animal desperate to get in. 3 days where every sound, footsteps, voices, laughter, felt swallowed whole. Inside, life shrank to essentials. The mess hall buzzed only during meal hours. The barracks smelled of wet wool, oil, and stale breath. The younger soldiers, restless by nature, filled the silence with cards, stories, dares, anything to drown the unease that came when the world outside disappeared. But even noise couldn't mask a deeper tension. The storm wasn't just outside. It was in them now. In their pride. In their perspective. Because the image of her still hung in every mind. The woman who'd climbed faster than any of them, who had turned the impossible into muscle memory. The woman the colonel himself had saluted. Anya Sharma had become the quiet myth they all shared, the one that turned disbelief into humility. But to her, myth didn't matter. What mattered was the work. She spent those days in motion, small, deliberate motion. Checking inventory. Reorganizing gear. Fixing what the cold had broken. To others, it looked like routine. But there was nothing casual about it. It was meditation. For Anya, movement was thought. The rhythm of her hands replaced words. Each piece of equipment she touched became part of a silent conversation she was having with the mountain itself. Sometimes, when the power flickered, she'd pause and watch the dim light shift across the metal walls of the depot. It reminded her of the way light used to move through the narrow canyons overseas, places where silence wasn't peace, it was warning. She lived through storms before, only those ones carried shrapnel instead of snow. And the strange part, the feeling was the same, a familiar stillness before the next test. Colonel Thorne didn't sleep much either. He tried to pretend it was the storm keeping him awake. But he knew better. The truth was harder to swallow than the cold coffee on his desk. He'd spent years believing strength came in one form, loud, visible, muscular. He'd led men by the weight of his presence, by the edge in his tone. Then one woman had climbed his mountain, broken his course, and destroyed that illusion in 9 minutes and 17 seconds. He couldn't stop replaying that number. 0917. It was like a riddle carved into his thoughts. He built an entire career on judging people quickly, decisively. And she'd shown him what he'd never bothered to see, the kind of strength that hides on purpose. He found himself thinking about her silence, about the way she'd accepted every insult, every order, every slight not as defeat but as data. She hadn't fought back because she didn't need to. She'd already measured him, just as she'd measured the course, the storm, everything. It was unsettling to realize how small he'd been in her eyes, not unimportant, just predictable. On the fourth morning, the storm softened. The wind became a whisper, the snow a hush. Sunlight tried to push through the clouds, faint and uncertain. The base looked unrecognizable, buried up to its eaves, walkways vanished, vehicles cocooned in white. The serpent's tooth, once the crown of the mountain, was invisible, erased by nature's indifference. Thorne stood by his office window, staring at the blank horizon. He could almost hear it, the pulse of the mountain beneath the snow, slow and eternal. Everything man built here, walls, ranks, rules, was temporary. She had understood that instinctively. He was only beginning to. He sighed, put on his coat, and stepped outside. The cold hit like a slap. It was the kind of cold that made every breath taste metallic. He trudged through waist-high drifts toward the supply depot, each step deliberate. He told himself it was to check on logistics. He knew that was a lie. Inside, the depot was warm barely, but enough. Anya was there, of course. Bent over a crate, tightening a strap on a pack she'd reassembled from parts of 3 others. Her hair was loose now, silver threads glinting in the dim light. She didn't turn when he entered. She didn't need to. She'd heard his steps before he reached the door. "Colonel," she said quietly. He stopped, snow melting off his boots. "Specialist," he replied. The title sounded smaller now, somehow inadequate. For a long time, neither spoke. The silence between them was thick, but not hostile, like 2 soldiers standing on opposite ends of the same trench, realizing they'd been fighting the same war all along. Finally, Thorne said, "I watched the footage again." Anya tightened the strap one last time, set the pack aside, and turned. Her expression was calm, unreadable. "The rescue?" she asked. "No," he said. "The run." He hesitated, searching for the right words. "I thought I understood endurance, discipline, command, but you—" He stopped himself. "I don't even know who you are." Her eyes softened, not out of sympathy, but understanding. "That's not in the file," she said simply. He exhaled, a cloud of vapor leaving his lips. "I misjudged you." "No," she said, shaking her head gently. "You judged exactly what you saw." That landed like a truth he didn't want to hear. He studied her for a moment, the stillness, the poise, the absence of ego. Most soldiers hid behind noise. She hid behind silence. "Section 7, he said finally. The words hung heavy. "I thought it was a myth." "It was meant to be," she replied. Her tone didn't change, neither proud nor secretive. Just factual. When a thing is too effective, they make it invisible, easier that way. He nodded slowly, piecing the puzzle together. "You were one of them." She looked down at her hands, flexed her fingers as if testing the memory of old gloves. "I trained them," she said quietly, "until training stopped being what they needed." Something flickered behind her eyes, not regret, not quite pain, but the echo of both. Thorne recognized it. It was the same look he saw in mirrors after every loss he pretended didn't matter. He cleared his throat. "The salute," he began, unsure how to finish. She met his eyes. "You didn't owe me that," she said. "Maybe not," he replied, "but I owed it to what you reminded us of." She tilted her head, curious. "And what's that?" "That sometimes rank is the slowest learner." For the first time since she'd arrived, she smiled, small, faint, genuine. A quiet acknowledgement, not of victory, but of mutual understanding. He nodded once awkwardly, then turned toward the door. The cold waited beyond it, merciless as ever. Just before stepping out, he said over his shoulder, "When the weather clears, command will want you reassigned. You could choose anywhere." "I'm fine here," she said. "Mountains are honest." He paused, then gave a slow nod. "Then let's make sure they stay that way." After he left, the depot felt quieter than before. The wind had died. The mountain seemed to hold its breath. Anya looked at the door for a long moment, then back at the equipment, ropes, clips, packs, every piece touched by hands that might never fully understand their purpose. She didn't need recognition. She never had. But for the first time in a long time, she felt seen, not as a relic or anomaly, but as part of something still living. She poured herself another mug of coffee, the steam curling in the cold light. Outside, the snow was beginning to slow, the storm losing its strength. The world would wake up again soon. Training would resume. The mountain would test them all over again. But now they would face it differently. Because they'd seen what patience looks like when it moves, and what dignity looks like when it acts. That night, as the first stars returned through the thinning clouds, Anya stood outside, wrapped in silence. The serpent's tooth was just visible again, its black peak cutting through the moonlight. It was the same mountain, but everything about it had changed. She exhaled, her breath turning to silver mist. For the first time in years, the cold didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. What happens after the world stops screaming? After the wind runs out of rage and leaves only silence behind? When the storm finally died, the mountain looked reborn, or maybe reborn in the way a scar is. Snow glazed the ridges in white armor. Every path the soldiers once knew was gone. The sun returned, thin and glassy, reflecting off the drifts like shattered mirrors. The air was painfully clear. Too clear. The base stirred back to life in slow motion. Engines coughed awake. Doors groaned open. Men blinked into the light, as if the world itself had been rebooted. But beneath the relief was something else, a quiet, waiting tension. Because storms erase more than trails, they erase certainty. And now, everyone was wondering what would be asked of them next. Colonel Thorne stepped out into the yard, boots sinking deep into untouched snow. He felt the sun on his face for the first time in a week, but the warmth didn't reach his chest. The mountain glared back at him, implacable. Behind his ribs lingered a sense he hadn't felt since his first command, doubt laced with awe. He'd spent the storm reading every report, rechecking damage logs, replaying the course footage until his eyes burned. The number 0917 no longer mocked him. It reminded him what precision looked like. And somewhere inside that memory was a decision forming, the kind that carried weight. At the supply depot, Anya was already outside, sleeves rolled, shovel in hand, carving neat paths through the drifts. Each movement measured, efficient, unhurried, the same rhythm she carried through everything. She worked alone until footsteps approached. Private Sato's voice came, half teasing, half respectful. "You could order a crew to do that, ma'am." She didn't stop. "If you want the path straight, you make it yourself." He smiled faintly, but the joke died as two jeeps growled toward them, engines sputtering. The first carried Colonel Thorne, the second Sergeant Major Vance. Both men climbed out, their faces set in that unreadable expression soldiers wear when something serious is coming. Thorne held a small folder in gloved hands, too thin for bureaucracy, too thick for comfort. "Specialist Sharma," he said. "Walk with me." They stopped near the edge of the cleared lot, where the snow met the sheer drop into the valley below. Far off, clouds still bruised the horizon, remnants of the storm. "A convoy from the western outpost," Thorne began, voice steady, "never made it through before the blizzard hit. Last transmission was 3 nights ago. 8 personnel, no contact since." Anya listened, eyes narrowing slightly against the glare. "They could have taken shelter in the ravine system," she said. "That's our hope," Vance replied. "But if they did, they're buried now. Command's requesting a recovery attempt." Thorne hesitated. "Hellos can't make the altitude until this front clears. We'd need a ground team. Light, fast, trained for high-angle movement." She waited for the question that hadn't yet been asked. It came quietly. "I want you to lead it." The wind bit through the pause that followed. Anya didn't answer immediately. She just studied the horizon, the endless white swallowing distance. Finally she said, "You have climbers." "None with your eyes," Thorne replied. "And none who'll follow you better than they'll follow me right now." It wasn't flattery. It was fact. She turned toward him. "You trust me suddenly." His mouth twitched, almost a smile. "I trust the mountain a little less." By midday, a 4-person rescue team assembled at the base of the ridge. Cohen limped forward, insisting on joining despite the brace on his leg. Sato handled communications. 2 young corporals from recon volunteered without being asked, the kind of eager that only half understood danger. Anya checked each of them silently, adjusting gear, redistributing weight. No speeches. No motivation. Just precision. Thorne watched from the staging area as they began their ascent. It struck him that she moved like gravity didn't apply to her the same way it did to the rest of them, as if she negotiated with it instead of fighting it. He felt something unfamiliar, not command, not authority, but faith. Hours passed. The rescue channel crackled with bursts of static, then her calm voice. "Crossing Ridge 2, visibility 10 meters, wind light, no avalanche signs." Each report came timed to the minute, clean and controlled. It reminded Thorne how much of leadership is tone. Even through a radio, her steadiness kept fear at bay. By dusk, the team reached the ravine system, a maze of ice tunnels and broken rock. The storm had carved walls 30 feet high, glittering like glass. They moved single file, headlamps cutting narrow cones through the blue darkness. Then a glint. Metal beneath snow. A shattered convoy wheel. "Found them," came her voice, softer now, followed by a pause that stretched too long. 3 vehicles, 2 overturned. Silence. Then quietly, 2 survivors. The channel crackled with Thorne's voice. "Status. Hypothermic, dehydrated but alive. We'll stabilize and move at dawn. No celebration. No relief. Just the same efficient calm that had carried her up the mountain, through the course, through everything. That night the team huddled inside a makeshift snow cave. The rescued soldiers slept under thermal blankets, their breathing shallow but steady. Cohen dozed with his rifle across his chest. Only Anya stayed awake, her back to the entrance, watching the faint shimmer of aurora slicing through the distant clouds. The sound of the wind reminded her of another place, another rescue long ago, desert instead of ice, sand instead of snow, a mission that had ended differently. That memory never left her. Maybe that was why she'd come here. Not to prove anything, but to finally forgive herself for something no one else remembered. Sadto stirred beside her, whispering through chattering teeth. "Ma'am, why you?" She looked over, eyes calm in the dim light. "What do you mean?" "Why still here? After all that, after the salute, you could have gone home." Anya looked back toward the sleeping forms, the storm-carved walls glowing faint green under the sky. "Home isn't where they send you," she said quietly. "It's the place that still needs you." He nodded slowly, not sure he understood but feeling the truth in it. At first light, they moved again. The wind had died completely, even sound seemed frozen. Step by step, they hauled the survivors up through the ravine, anchoring ropes, cutting stairs into the ice. It was brutal, mechanical work. But no one complained. Not while she led. When they finally crested the ridge, sunlight spilled across the snowfield below, the base, tiny and distant, waiting. Thorne's voice came over the radio, low but filled with something new. "Copy spect," he stopped himself, corrected. "Copy specialist Sharma, we have visual, well done." For a moment she didn't answer. Then, "Team effort, sir, see you home." They reached the base at dusk. The air was still, the mountain quiet again. No fanfare, no applause, just quiet nods, gloved hands gripping shoulders, silent gratitude passing between tired eyes. Thorne met them at the ramp. His salute this time was smaller, less formal, more human. She returned it the same way. No words were needed. Because both of them knew the truth. Records fade, storms pass, commands change. But competence, the kind that asks for nothing, stays. That night, as the aurora rippled over the frozen range, Anya sat alone outside the depot, steam curling from her mug. The cold bit at her cheeks, but she didn't move. She listened to the mountain breathing beneath the snow, steady and endless. Sometimes redemption doesn't arrive as applause or forgiveness. Sometimes it just means being asked again, trusted again, needed again. She smiled faintly, eyes on the stars. The mountain, for once, seemed to smile back. What happens when silence earns an audience? When the thing that no one believed in suddenly becomes the one they all want a piece of. The storm was gone now. Spring sunlight had begun to bleed through the ridgelines, turning the white slopes into rivers of meltwater and glass. The serpent's tooth glistened in the distance, half buried, half revealed, like something both ruined and sacred. At dawn, the air smelled different. Alive. Thawed earth, wet stone, diesel, hope. The base woke early, restless. Men talked in softer tones now, their laughter carrying less edge. Drills resumed, but something in their rhythm had changed, less arrogance, more purpose. Because after what they'd seen, no one wanted to be the soldier who laughed first and learned last. And at the center of it all, moving quietly through the morning mist, was Specialist Anya Sharma. Same uniform, same calm expression. But something invisible had shifted around her, an atmosphere. When she passed, voices lowered. Not out of fear, not even respect. It was something quieter, recognition. Colonel Thorne stood on the observation deck, coffee in hand, eyes scanning the course below. Crews worked to repair the bridge that had nearly taken 3 lives the week before the storm. The ropes shimmered in the morning light, and for a fleeting moment he thought about how fragile everything was, how even the strongest steel bent if the wind lasted long enough. Behind him, footsteps. Not military boots, polished leather. A different rhythm. He didn't have to turn to know it was command. 2 men and a woman in winter coats stood near the doorway, crisp and deliberate. Their insignia gleamed, their expressions unreadable. They looked like people who'd come not to understand but to claim. "Colonel Thorne," the lead officer said. "Fine work here. The board reviewed your performance during the blizzard. You've kept this base operational under impossible conditions." Thorne nodded. "Not alone, sir." The officer smiled, the kind that never reached the eyes. "Yes, that brings us to the matter of Specialist Sharma." Thorne's hand tightened around the mug. "What about her?" "She's drawn attention," the officer continued. "Her name resurfaced after the Section 7 audits. Some of our partners are interested in reactivating the old program in a limited capacity." Vance, standing near the map table, shifted uneasily. Thorne's jaw set. "Reactivating. Only those who have proven irreplaceable. You know how rare that word is, Colonel." The woman beside him stepped forward. "Her record, her performance, her composure, she's wasted here. We could use her where her skills matter." Thorne finally turned, eyes cold. "They already matter." The officer's smile didn't falter. "We'll debrief her in 2 days. Transport arrives Thursday." And just like that, they left. Their boots echoed down the corridor, leaving the silence heavier than before. When Thorne finally went looking for her, he found her outside, sitting on a crate near the depot, wiping down a climbing harness. The late sun cast long, golden stripes across the snow. She looked at peace, and he hated that he was about to disturb it. He didn't bother with rank or protocol. "Command's pulling you out," he said. She didn't look up. "I figured. You're not even going to ask where." "I already know where." A faint smile. "They always send ghosts back to the dark." He exhaled slowly, frustration threading through his breath. "They think you're a weapon." "I was." Her calmness unsettled him. "You don't have to go." She finally looked up, her eyes steady, almost kind. "Don't make this a rescue mission, Colonel. You already did that once." He shook his head. "This is different. You belong here." She wiped her hands on a cloth, set it aside, and stood close enough that the wind carried her voice softly between them. "Belonging isn't about place, it's about purpose." Section 7 forgot that. They turned purpose into orders. He stared at her, seeing something he hadn't allowed himself to see before, not strength, not legend, but exhaustion. The kind that hides under poise. That evening, the officers gathered for a debrief in the command tent. Paperwork, directives, the usual suffocation of decision by committee. But when they called for her, she didn't come. They sent a runner. Then another. By midnight, it was clear she was gone. Her bunk was neatly made. Locker empty, except for a folded note and her base patch. On the note, 4 words written in block letters. "Keep the mountain honest." Thorne read it 3 times before setting it down. It felt like a command and a blessing all at once. By dawn, the sun rose on a changed base. Trucks idled, search patrols readied. But Thorne didn't order them to go. He stood by the window instead, eyes tracing the high ridges. Vance entered quietly, holding a mug of coffee. "She's not missing," he said softly. "She's free." Thorne didn't answer. He just watched as a faint silhouette moved against the snow far up the slope. A lone figure climbing toward the upper trail. The same mountain. The same precision. But no harness this time. No course. Just a line of footprints vanishing into the dawn. "She won't come back, will she?" Thorne asked quietly. Vance smiled faintly. "She never really left." Days passed. Command came and went, frustrated. Paperwork closed her file again. Redacted, erased. History repeating itself, the way it always does when it meets something it can't control. But the base changed. Training changed. Men spoke to one another differently. They listened more. Learned more. Even Thorne's voice lost its sharpness, traded volume for weight. Sometimes, late at night, he'd stand by the window of his office, staring at the mountain under moonlight. And if the wind shifted just right, he could swear he heard her voice, calm, measured, distant. Not words, just presence. And that was enough. Weeks later, during a new round of operator trials, one of the younger soldiers hesitated halfway across the bridge. The rope creaked. Fear hit him hard. Below the gorge yawned open, a white, endless mouth. Then a voice from the radio cut through the static. A woman's voice. Soft, controlled. "Breathe, 3 seconds in, 2 out. Don't fight the wind, let it move around you." The soldier froze, recognizing it immediately. He followed the words, step by step, breath by breath, and made it across. When the line cleared, Thorne picked up his headset, but the channel was dead. No call sign. No trace. Just the sound of wind across high snow. He smiled quietly to himself. "Keep the mountain honest," he whispered. Because somewhere out there, beyond the ridges, beyond the reach of rank and recognition, a woman named Anya Sharma was still moving through the cold, unseen, unrecorded, untouchable. Still teaching. Still leading. Still proving that some soldiers don't retire. They just disappear into the horizon, becoming part of what they defended. How does a story end when its hero never wanted one? When the last chapter isn't written in triumph, but in traces, footprints that the wind keeps trying to erase. Spring melted into summer across the range. The serpent's tooth stood bare again, stripped of its white armor, black stone gleaming like wet glass under the new sun. The base had changed, not in walls or numbers but in tone. Orders sounded quieter. Laughter carried farther. Even the wind somehow seemed gentler. Colonel Marcus Thorne had become part of that silence. The man who once measured worth by volume now walked the yard before dawn, speaking only when needed. He watched his soldiers train with a patience that used to feel foreign to him, a patience he'd learned from a woman who no longer wore their uniform. Every morning, he stopped at the edge of the course. The clock still hung above the beacon, 9 minutes 17 seconds. Untouched. Unbeaten. And beside it, a small brass plate that simply read, "Keep the mountain honest." No name. No rank. Just the message she left. On the first clear night of midsummer, the northern lights returned, faint ribbons of green and violet threading across the high peaks. The men called it the Spectre's Veil. Superstition, maybe. Or memory trying to make meaning out of what it couldn't let go. Thorne stood outside the depot, the same place where she once sat, hands steady, eyes distant. He remembered her final words, "Belonging isn't about place, it's about purpose." He hadn't understood them then. He did now. Because purpose wasn't a mission. It was the space between them, the way one person's conviction can quietly alter an entire world. Later that night, a convoy arrived from command. New recruits. Fresh faces, too young to understand the ghost stories they were walking into. They laughed at the plaque, at the clock, at the myth. Thorne didn't correct them. He let them laugh because one day the mountain would do the teaching. He simply said, You'll meet her up there, and walked away. Weeks turned into months. Autumn came early that year, painting the slopes in rust and gold. One afternoon, while clearing out old storage logs, Vance found a sealed case at the back of the depot. No tags, no lock, just a symbol burned into the lid. A simple silver circle with 7 marks carved around it. He brought it to Thorne. Inside were papers, hand-drawn course maps, terrain studies, notes written in clean, tight handwriting. At the top of every page, one phrase repeated like a heartbeat. Every obstacle has a rhythm. Find it and it becomes a path. Thorne closed the case slowly. He didn't sign it into records. He placed it back where they found it. Some things, he thought, don't belong to history. They belong to those who remember. That winter a storm rose again, smaller, colder, meaner. Half the equipment froze. Visibility dropped to nothing. And in that chaos, a distress beacon sounded from the upper ridge. A training squad stranded. Thorne ordered a rescue team, but before the radios even stabilized, a voice broke through the static. Team secured, heading down, everyone's breathing. The operator frowned. Colonel, no call sign, just a female voice. Thorne felt his chest tighten. He leaned toward the radio. Identify yourself. Static answered. Then faint laughter. Soft, familiar. Gone. He closed his eyes and smiled. Welcome home, he whispered. The next morning, as sunlight burned through the clouds, a single set of footprints was found near the ridge, descending from the mountain, ending at the edge of camp. No trail leading in. No return path leading out. Only a single word carved into the frost-coated stone beside them. Enough. Thorne stood there for a long time, gloved hand resting on the mark. Snow began to fall again, gentle, almost kind. He looked up at the mountain, exhaling a breath that felt like letting go. That evening, as the flag lowered against the orange sky, he spoke quietly to his unit. No podium, no script, just truth. She was told to go home, he said. But she reminded us what home really means. It's not where we rest. It's where we refuse to stop trying. He paused, watching the light fade behind the peaks. Sometimes strength isn't about fighting harder. It's about standing still, long enough to understand why you fight at all. Then he looked at the course, the ropes, the beacon, the endless climb, and said the words that would become the new motto carved into the gate. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Night fell over the base. The last lights dimmed. And on the distant ridge, just for a moment, a figure seemed to stand against the stars, motionless, balanced, watching. Then the wind rose, the snow swirled, and she was gone. But the mountain stayed honest. And so did they.